Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Undetected, the Disappearance of Prisma Reyes. I'm your host, Kay. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's go ahead and jump right on in. Pardon my raspy, hoarse voice. I guess I suppose I fit right in with this pandemic, right? But nonetheless. Anyways, when we initially started this podcast, our goal was to help raise awareness for Prisma's disappearance, as discussed prior. We ultimately wanted to release maybe 1 to 2 episodes a month over a series of a few months. As you can tell, so far, I've just kind of sucked at that whole schedule thing. But honestly, so much has changed since all of this started and since then, with this case, that I've become so wrapped up in the investigation that the podcast honestly kind of just fell to the wayside. With that being said, we also wanted to lay out the potential suspects, or persons of interest rather, discuss some theories, dive into the timeline, discuss our insider knowledge on the case, and more. Many of you know we're not only in contact with Prisma's immediate family, but we're now in contact with her child's father, her friends, former coworkers, and more. And as of most recently, we're also in contact with the detective on the case, Detective Barrett. We don't want to jeopardize anything with the investigation, and we never have. The good thing about this so-called pause, I guess we'll call it, for lack of a better term, is that when we come back, we'll have more information, more evidence, and more interviews than ever. I can also assure you that no one else will have this kind of insight, but in the meantime, again, I just don't want to mess up a damn thing right now. And if I'm being honest, one thing I'm really good at is screwing shit up. So let's just not even go there right now, okay? As you can probably pick up on already, a lot has happened over the course of the last few months that has ultimately brought us to where we are today, including the decision that I have ultimately come to at this time in regards to this podcast. By now, you all are probably pretty familiar with how I became involved in this case, and you all should know by now that we have constant communication with Prisma's loved ones, and that door of communication is always open. Although I guess one thing I never expected to happen was for Prisma's loved ones to become so close to my heart and become so important to me. I have never wanted to find Prisma or seek justice for her and her son more than I do now. And with that being said, my time now needs to be devoted to doing just that. Not to mention the fact that it's more important than it has ever been, honestly, to keep details of Prisma's disappearance close to the chest. It's funny how things really kind of seem to take a turn over the last few weeks, as I legitimately just told my partner, we could always, Sarah Turney it. What does Sarah Turney it mean? Well, go ahead and just check out the Voices for Justice podcast on the disappearance of Sarah's sister, Alyssa Turney, and you'll soon understand exactly what I mean. But to make a long story short, Sarah took to the media and her very own podcast to fight for justice for her sister, and ultimately achieved just that, as her father was just arrested a short time ago. Sarah never gave up on her sister, as we refused to give up on Prisma. No matter how you put it, we're going to fight for Prisma. And that's what has brought me to this very difficult decision to, in fact, put our podcast series on hold, for the time being anyway. I stayed up late last night trying to find the right words to say to you all. How do I adequately explain our reasoning for simply bringing this podcast to an abrupt halt and a pause? One thing I need you all to know is that this is far from the end. Rather, it's truly just a new beginning, a really good new beginning. We're at such a pivotal point in the investigation that it would be beyond silly for us to release some sort of information that may hinder finding Prisma in any way, shape, or form, and ultimately lead to the conviction of whoever is involved and responsible for her disappearance. If there's one thing that I can say for certain at this time, it's that Prisma would never have just left her son on her own doing. That is abundantly clear. By now, you also likely know just how invested we are in the case and with Prisma's loved ones, obviously. We've mentioned a few times how her son Dominic is our driving force. We want to bring his mommy home to him, and At the very least, bring him answers and justice that they both deserve. My partner and I have spent countless hours conducting interviews over the last few months, and as much as I'd love to release that information and clear the air about some things, unfortunately, now just isn't the time to do so. I even had a so-called moment this past weekend, as we were bombarded with false accusations and assumptions, seemingly all of a sudden, simply because we're just not willing to release certain information at this time. The general public seems to feel completely entitled to information that could make a case fall apart, put potentially innocent people in harm's way, and much more. This past weekend, I guess I had what my mom would call a come to Jesus moment. I mean, it just made me realize it's just not worth it, and it's much more important. My time is much better spent trying to find answers to Prisma's disappearance. Anyway, sometimes you just have to do what's best for the case. And in my opinion, continuing this podcast and being constantly harassed to release information not privy to the public isn't what's best for this case. Finding Prisma is what's most important, no matter what others may think. And the awesome part about it is that the people who need to know this already do. Although we won't be working on new episodes for release of this podcast right now and right away, there are still ways that you can keep up with the case and join the discussion. Although we cannot be a part of that discussion right now, we definitely take in your tips and any information that you guys have. It's very helpful, so please continue to do so in the meantime. If you search for at the little at symbol, Find Prisma on Facebook, you should come across the page Where is Prisma Reyes immediately. Just click on that page and go ahead and like it and follow it, and that way you can get any kind of updates that we have. There's also a discussion group under the exact same name, and there's a little bit more discussion on the case. I'll also put the link in the description below, along with a website that you can visit for more information. At this time, I have a promise to fulfill, and that is to bring answers to Prisma's family and ultimately bring her home. I found myself saying last night, we're either going to be bringing her home alive and we're going to be the best of friends for the rest of time, or at the very least, I'm going to get her loved ones, especially her young son, the answers, and hopefully the justice that they deserve. I mean, hell, who knows? We may be back in a few days, or a few months, but we definitely hope it's sooner rather than later. But unfortunately, for now anyway, we're going to have to sign off. Rest assured though, this isn't goodbye. It's simply a, I'll see you soon. Hopefully, very, very soon.